Hi everyone, welcome to today's brush party. We're painting our very cute and brand new Freddy the Frog, and I'm really looking forward to seeing how amazing these turn out. So what we will do is we'll go through the colours first, we'll go through all of the equipment, and then we'll get started in just a couple of minutes. So with all of our paintings, you are more than welcome to change the colours as much as you like. Now, frogs are literally all different colours. You can find some really crazy ones if you look on online. But majoritively, like, they're mostly green. So if you want to stick with a green frog, that's totally fine. I've seen a lot of them with the little red fingers, which do look really, really cute. So I will leave it up to you what colour you want to go for. You don't have to change the colour of the frog if you don't want to. You could change the background colour, or you can just leave it exactly the same as it is, same as mine. So whichever you choose to do, it's going to be absolutely fine, as long as you take lots of photos. So yeah, after every single step, I will remind you to take pictures. So I'm just trying to get in the frame. There we go. Take lots of photos so that you guys can send them to us when you have finished, because we would love to see photos of your amazing frogs. So on my palette, I have got mostly white, yellow and blue. Now, we can obviously mix yellow and blue to get the green, but if you want to add a neat green to your palette, like if you've got a tube of green paint, then you're more than welcome to use that if you prefer that sort of green. But I quite like the green that you get when you mix the yellow and the blue together, because if you look at the background, there are some patches where you can really see the blue show through. So it just helps to break up the amount of green that is actually on this canvas. So it's all green apart from the little red ladybird, and obviously the eyes that are white. So there is quite a lot of green with this colour. So if you have got a ready mixed green, I would still put on the yellow and the blue as well, just so you can change it up a little bit as we're going through. So the other two colours it will need is red and black. So yeah, red and black. I was going to say, yeah, that is definitely right. So we've got all the primary colours. So you've got red, yellow, blue, and black and white as well. I'm absolutely losing it today. So if you want to add any purples to your palette, you are more than welcome to. You can also add orange as well. But yeah, I will leave it down to you as to what colours you choose to use today. The brushes that we're going to use are just our 3 normal brush party brushes. So we've got the big background brush. So you might have exactly the same brush as me, where you've got a flat edge. You might also have a cropped brush, so it might have a diagonal edge. You mostly just want a big brush and a small brush to get through all the different details in the painting. I mean, there's not that many small details in this one, so you could actually just do it all with one big brush. So if that's all you've got, that's absolutely fine. So the other 2 brushes that I do have is my cropped brush, which is this one here, which is a 3/8 brush or a half brush, depends what pack you've got. And then also a number 6 pointy brush. So this one might be quite handy when it comes to adding in the ladybird or whatever other insect you'd like to add. It's just quite good to have the details. So yeah, big brush, if not, all 3 if possible. The other couple of things that we're going to need for painting is some water. So I've got my water in my little red cup here. I've also got an apron on because I'm a little bit messy when it comes to painting. You guys might be as well. So it might be worth grabbing some wet wipes or some kitchen roll or something, just to mop up any paint, just in case you have any spillages. And I've also got a painty top. So I've got quite a lot of paint on it. Doesn't really come out, so make sure you're not wearing your favourite clothing items today, just in case you do get paint absolutely everywhere. It comes off of skin and everything like that, and also off of wallpaper, you'll be pleased to know, and wooden flooring as well. So you just want to make sure you do mop it up as quickly as possible, just to make sure it doesn't stain. And we obviously need something to paint on. So I've got a 16 by 20 inch canvas. But this one will work perfectly on a square canvas, on a round canvas, on a bit of card. You can put it onto anything. So it's a really fun one to do. So I'm really hoping that you guys are going to enjoy it today. You can also, on YouTube, it's a live stream, so if you need to go a bit slower today, you're more than welcome to pause the video and rewind it as many times as you want to. So don't feel like you have to rush to keep up with me. When I say we're going on to a new step and you're still going with your brush strokes and things, then just pause it and then join back in whenever you can. So yeah, the main thing is to not rush, enjoy yourselves, and if you need to ask any questions throughout the event, then you're more than welcome to use that live chat option, which is on the right hand side of your screen, which if you have a YouTube account or a Google account, then you can log in and you can ask questions as we're going through. You don't have to use that live chat if you don't want to. If you don't have the option of logging into that, you can always send a message on Facebook or an email as well. Although I won't see the emails when we're live, so possibly more likely to use the Facebook if possible, or the live chat. But yes, do take lots of pictures, like I said at the beginning, take lots of photos. Yeah, we're going to start with the background. So we're going to mix up a little bit of white as our main colour for this background to keep it nice and pale. And then we're going to put a little bit of yellow into it and then a little bit of blue. So the background is actually, it's not particularly green as such. It's kind of a mix of the yellow and blue, which when you sort of take a step back, it kind of looks a bit more green than what it actually is. So for the background, we need to make sure we've got our biggest brush to start with. Otherwise, we might be here for a very long time painting with a tiny brush. So find the biggest brush that you guys have. And we're going to start by dipping it in the water. Oh yeah, my name is Becky, by the way. So if you do have any questions, feel free to ask away. I probably should have started with my name, really. It's a bit rude, isn't it? So yeah, big brush. I've dipped it in the water and I'm going to start with the white paint just to make sure we've got a nice pale background. So what I'm doing is separating some of my white paint, moving it round to make sure that all the water is fully well mixed into that paint. Otherwise, we might end up with drips and everything. And drips are sometimes really tricky to get rid of later. So make sure that the water is fully mixed in to your white paint or your separated white paint. Okay, so into that white, we are then going to pop in a little bit of yellow. Now, you don't need that much yellow on the brush. I would keep it, again, quite light to start with. So I've picked up a bit of white on the corner of my brush and I'm mixing it in to that new bit of white that we've added the water to. So we've got quite a nice lemony kind of yellowy colour. So that is what I've got at the second. Into this, we are going to pop a very small amount of blue. Now, we don't want it to go too green just yet, because this is just for the lighter colours, but we do want a tiny bit of a bit of blue mixed in to make it like a nice marbly effect on the palette. So that means that it's not fully mixed on the palette, it's just sort of moving the brush around and leave a little trail where you can see that blue going through. Okay, when you've got something a little bit like this, we are going to grab quite a lot on the brush and we're going to use the flat edge of the brush and we're literally going to paint big messy brush strokes all over the place. So there's no structure to this background whatsoever. It's just big patches of yellowier colours or more like a yellowy green and then some blues as well. So what I would do is carry on mixing on that same part of the palette every time we change colour. So if you want to make it a bit more yellow, then you can always add a little bit more yellow into it, mix it round. But again, don't mix it too much because you don't want the colours to change too dramatically. So yeah, it's made it quite yellowy. And I'm just going all over the place with the brush. So I'm kind of just, I've started over in that left corner. You could start in the bottom corner. It's up to you where you start, as long as eventually it all ends up being covered. That's all that matters. So I've done a couple of brush strokes with a bit more yellow mixed in. And I quite like how bright that is. I think when we add a bit of blue to it, it's going to look quite nice. So whenever you're ready and you've done a couple of brush strokes with that slightly yellowier colour, we can add in a little bit more blue. And we're just literally going to play around with adding in more blue and adding in more yellow and just taking it across the whole of the painting. So when you add in, can you see I've added that slightly more bluier green in. It's not quite blended in as well. So what I need to do is pick up a little bit more paint and a bit more water on the brush as well, because it just means that the paint isn't quite thick enough on the brush. So the best way to get your blending to make it a little bit more smooth across your background is just to go into your old colour. So on the canvas, I've gone into my yellowier colour. Yellowier? I'm not even sure if that's the word. My more yellow colour. And because that's wet, it should, when you pull the brush back down, cross over into your new colour and get the paint to smudge. And that's all the blending is just smudging the paints all into one sort of mix. Now, like I said at the beginning, it's not like a neat background or anything like that. There's no structure to it. But you don't want it to be stripy or really defined patches. So what you want to try and avoid is big circles of colour. So that's why we do want to have a little bit of blending, but it's not essential for it to be absolutely perfect. So this is a nice background where you can just kind of forget about everything and just, you know, focus on your painting and hopefully end up with something that you are going to absolutely love. So I've popped a bit more yellow back in, and then I'm going to pop a bit more blue back in, and literally just mixing between those two shades of green. Now you could go even lighter if you wanted to. If you're finding that maybe your colours are coming out a little bit too dark, then you can pop in some neat white onto your palettes. So you can grab a little bit of neat white on your brush, and you can take that straight to your canvas and go all different directions again. And that way, adding the white in there just breaks it up even more. So, another thing that you can do is you can use that blue by itself with a little bit of white. So you don't actually always need to mix it into your original colour. If you're a bit unsure about this though, I would mix it into your original colour because sometimes it can come out very, very bright if you use it by itself. So to be safe, I would mix onto the same part of the palette every time. But if you want to sort of try something new and push the boundaries, then grab a little bit of white, move it to a clean part of the palette, and add a little dot of blue. Now you really don't need a lot of blue at all. You just need the tiniest little dot to make it quite a dark-ish kind of blue. And with this colour, I would pop it right next to some of your other colours that are already wet on the canvas, so that you get that slightly more blue shade. But it's not going to stand out too much because you don't want it to draw too much attention, too much focus. So you can maybe do a little bit more blue. Oh, that's better. Okay, so we've got a nice blue going on. And then you can just go back in with some of your other colour that we've been using so far, so that the yellow and the white, a bit of blue as well. Go back to your first colour and then just doing exactly the same thing. So all that's done is just made that blue side just a little bit more blue. Because obviously if we do keep mixing on that same part of the palette, it is going to be quite similar colours all the way around, which is totally fine. If you're not too sure about blending, then definitely keep just adding to that same patch on the palette. But actually that worked quite nicely. So yeah, I mean, try it if you want to. Try adding in that neat blue with a bit of white. And you could do the same with the yellow as well. If you really wanted to, you could add some yellow and white together and just having those two colours separated. So like the blue on one side, yellow on the other, and just keep going between those bits. And then you can use the green that we've got on the palette, so the yellow and blue together, to get your mid colours. So I'm throwing loads and loads of options out there at you guys. All you need to do is, if all else fails, if you're really not sure about the colours that you're using, just add yellow and blue together and you will have a lovely, lovely background. So I'm hoping that you've all had a really lovely break from school. If you are on your half-term Easter break, then yeah, do take a picture because it'd be so nice to see all of the amazing paintings that you're able to do when you're at home. So that colour there was quite a lot of yellow and blue together, and that was quite a nice green. So yeah, there really is no right or wrong with this background. I know I've kind of made it overcomplicated. I was like, you can go with the yellow and the blue and all together. But really, it doesn't matter what colours you use. As long as you've got some kind of paint on the background and it's maybe blue, maybe yellow, and maybe a bit of green, then that's fine. You might even have an orange background. So you can literally change it as much as you want to. There's no rules as to how much you follow my instructions. It's all good. You can do whatever you want to do. I think mine might be missing some of that blue colour. I really like that blue colour down in that corner. So I think I might pop a little bit more blue and white together. And I'm going to pop a couple more brush strokes into some of this space that I've got over here. And I'm keeping my brush strokes quite big actually as well. So I'm trying not to keep my brush strokes too small. I think the bigger they are, the more dramatic this background's going to be. And I actually think it's quite a bit easier to blend if the colours, to blend the colours if the brush strokes are slightly bigger. I've definitely ran out of white already. Oops. So I'm hoping that you guys are okay so far with your backgrounds. If you do need any help at all, just let me know. I'm just going to keep talking at you. So I'm hoping that you're kind of following along okay. As long as you've got some sort of colour on the background, then that's all good. And nice messy brush strokes, the main thing. Because the frog itself is quite neat, so it's really nice to have a little bit of a contrast, which means the colour, like the style is quite different. So the background is really quite messy and all over the place, and the frog is a little bit more precise. There we go. So when you've done your background, you want to take a big step back from your painting, and if you can see any patches that look a little bit empty or maybe lacking a bit of colour, then you're more than welcome to go back in and add any other brush strokes that you want to add in any colour. I think I might need some more yellow in mine. Looking at it, I think it's gone very light. So yeah, I'm going to add a bit more yellow to this section over here. So I'm going to grab my yellow on my brush, a little bit of white. I'm just going to warm up that green over here. So with acrylic paints, you can overlap your colours lots and lots of times. You can layer up this painting as many times as you need to. So if something isn't quite how you're wanting it to go, you can just paint over it and blend it out, and it will be absolutely fine. So if you feel like you want to change your mind with something or change your colour, then you can do. There's no sort of rules as to how much you do on this. Okay, I think that's a little bit nicer. Maybe do a little bit more yellow down in this patch in here. So the yellow paint is actually a really good one to use over the top of your background. If you're thinking it's looking a little bit too patchy and it's really not blended at all, and you're struggling to get the colours to overlap, then the yellow paint is great because it's kind of got a little bit of, it's a bit see-through. So when you do put it on over the top, it doesn't completely cover the old colour, it kind of just adds to it, which warms up the background and it looks really quite nice. So if in doubt, whack a bit of yellow over the top and it will be fantastic. So where we've done the background, I will just bring that a bit closer again, because on the camera it's looking very, very light, but it's not actually too horrendously light. So hopefully that's helping a little bit. Hopefully you can still see a little bit of that green. And we definitely need to paint our edges. So I think for this one, it would look so effective with a little bit of dark green. So I'm going to paint my edges with some yellow mixed together to a bit of blue. So yellow and blue. And I'm probably going to just leave it as yellow and blue to get a nice dark green. And this colour would look really nice going all the way around the sides. So when you're painting the edges, I would have the brush lengthways, so vertically. And if you hold the canvas, quite steady, you can put the brush at the back of the canvas and push it forward. And that means that you're not going to get any marks, hopefully, on the front of your canvas. It will all just stick to the side. So hopefully when these go up on your wall, they'll look nice and professional and finished as well when you've got your edges all done. Now you don't have to do your edges now if you don't want to, you can do them at the end. but I always forget about my edges. So I always like to do them right at the beginning so that I don't forget them. So you can go down the sides, you can go along the bottom and down along the top as well. So kind of just all around the sides. And if you do get any paint that's not supposed to be on the front, then you can blend it out. There we go. So yeah, it looks much nicer. The background painted and the edges painted as well. And not, but you don't have to do it in green. You can do it any colour you like. So we do need to make sure that our background is nice and dry for the next step. So if you're still going with your backgrounds, I would either use a hairdryer to dry up your paintings completely, or you can flap your canvases. Now, I know that we have just painted the sides of our paintings, which probably wasn't the best idea if you've got a lot of paint on there, but a good way to kind of not get paint completely on your hands is to hold around the back of your canvases, and you can flap them like this. You can gently waft them to get them nice and dry, but just be very careful that you don't drop them. Definitely don't want to drop those lovely backgrounds on the floor. But if you've got quite a wet background, if it is really, really like thick with paint, then it definitely might be worth using a hairdryer or standing outside for a minute and just wafting them around in the wind, and they should dry fairly quickly. So the next step, when your canvases are dry, is to add in all of the stems and yeah, what are they called? Grass. It's grass. So we'll add all the grass and stems and everything into the background. So for this, you can either carry on with your bigger brush, or if you're a little bit nervous about that big brush, you can switch to your smaller one, and that'll be fine as well. So we're going to start with the darker leaves, grass. So we're going to start with these darker ones, and then we'll add the lighter ones on top. So again, this background can be as busy or as empty as you want it to be. The one thing I would say though is that you definitely want to make sure that your lovely frog is going to stand out against your background. So I would probably just do 2 or 3 of your darker ones to start with, then go on to your lighter ones, just so we don't fill it up too much. And then once we've got that done, we can take a step back and we can see if we've still got space for more, leaving a bit of a gap around the middle, then we can just add them in. Like I said before, you can add this as many times as you want to. So it's not like once we finish that layer, we move on. That's the last layer is like finished. You can just go back to it as many times as you want to, and it'll be absolutely fine. So you definitely want to make sure you've got plenty of yellow and blue and white on your palettes for this next step, because that is what we're going to be using for the greens. So I'm going to carry on with my big brush, but I will show you how to use the smaller cropped one as well, just in case you guys have got a slightly different brush to me. So with the cropped brush, if you've got one that's got long bristles on one side and short bristles on the other, then the rule for this brush is that you always want to make sure that you're leading with the shorter bristles and dragging the long ones behind. If you try and do it the other way, the bristles just bunch up, and it really makes it hard for the paintbrush to actually flow along the canvas. So I would definitely try and just stare at the brush, making sure you know which side's the shorter side, which side's the long side, and make sure that you definitely lead with that shorter side. So yeah, I'll show you with this brush first and what it looks like, and then I'm going to go back to the bigger brush, the flat one. So I think the first one that we should probably start with is the one that our frog is going to be sitting on. It's quite a main blade of grass that we should probably get in first. So let's grab a little bit of yellow, a bit of blue. So pretty much that colour we just used to paint the sides in, but I'm going to make it even darker. So to make that green a little bit darker, we just need to pop a tiny bit of black into it as well. So I've just picked up a little bit of black, mix it in to my blue and yellow. And for this, you definitely want to make sure you've got quite a lot of water mixed in, because if it's a bit too sticky, if the paint's not quite runny enough, then it doesn't quite come out as smooth as you'd like it to. It goes quite sticky, and if you have a look at this one, actually, that's quite a good example. This one here, oh, I didn't have enough water on my brush. Actually, you can't really see it on the camera, but there's quite a lot of little dots showing through. And that's just where the paint isn't quite thick enough or runny enough for it to sit into all the grooves of the canvas. So you kind of want it like a little bit creamy, like that kind of texture. And my green is something a little bit like that. Now you can make it even darker if you want to, you can make it a bit lighter. Whatever green comes out, we can pop it on the canvas and we can adapt it afterwards. So let's mark in roughly where we want this to go. And the first marker is on the right hand side and about halfway down the painting. So halfway down is kind of about here. So it's always good to start with a little dot or a little dash or something just to show where you're going to start the line, and then another one to show where you're going to end it, because it's much easier to adapt a little dot and move a dot around than it is to change a whole big line. And again, we want to make sure that we've got lots of space for our frog to go. Now, if we do this line too high, we might run out of space for his eyes, and he might look like he's going to be flying off the top of the canvas. So the next dot we need to do needs to be a lot lower than our first dot. So let's find a third of the way up from the bottom. So the best way to find a third is to pitch your canvas in 3 even sections. So I always use my hands to get my markers in. So have your hands on the sides like this, and you want to think of having 3 even areas on your painting. I think that's kind of about right. And on the left hand side, on that bottom hand, is roughly where we want our second dot. Now it doesn't have to be that exact. If you want to just make it a little bit lower than your first dot, that's fine. It does not have to be a third, but if you want to go for measurements, then a third of the way up is perfect. When you're using your cropped brush, remember, leading with the short bristles. So if I'm going to start from the right hand side, I've got the short bristles facing me because I'm going to be pulling them down this way to join up with my other dot. So we end up with a nice long line joining those dots together. Now that's obviously quite thin, and that little blade of grass probably will not support this little dude here. He's quite big, quite chunky, so he needs quite a big blade of grass, and this is actually the biggest one on the painting. So if you've got that smaller cropped brush, which is your angled brush here, you might want to go over that line a few times and just start your brush stroke a little bit lower down or a bit higher up, and just repeat it a few times until you're happy with the size of the line. You could also have the brush with the long bristles pointing up and drag it all the way across. And then that way you're using the whole width of the brush, which means that every bristle is going to be touching the canvas, and you get quite a nice long thick line without having to go over it too many times. I think I could probably make mine a little bit bigger. I'm planning on doing quite a big frog, and I think that might be a little bit too small. So yeah, just keep going until you've got the thickness that you're happy with. I'm going to pop a little bit more yellow, black and blue together. And it doesn't matter if this line is straight or not. So if you've got some slight wobbles in it, that's absolutely fine. I definitely encourage a few wobbles on this line. So it's quite nice for maybe some bits to be a little bit taller. Maybe another bit that comes down a bit lower than the line. And I'm just going all the way across. So my blade of grass is about the width of about 2 fingers-ish. You could definitely make it a bit thicker if you wanted to, but yeah, however thick you make it, you definitely want to make sure that it carries on around the side of the painting. So just continue it around the edges on both sides. So I didn't do this edge. It doesn't quite look as good. There we go. That sounds better. So that is our first main blade of grass that our frog is going to be sitting on. So for this next couple of steps, it's exactly the same brush stroke as what we've just done. So if you found it a bit tricky with your diagonal brush, feel free to go back to your big flat brush if you've got one of those. If you've just got a round brush like this one, then it doesn't matter what way around you hold it, as long as you've got plenty of paint on the brush and pull it along nice and slowly, you'll be totally fine. So any brush is absolutely fine for this step. So that is my main one. I'm going back to my big brush. And yeah, the next couple of ones can be literally wherever you want them to go. But I just wouldn't do loads going across the middle of the painting, because otherwise our frog isn't really going to show up too well. It's probably better to add more at the end. So I'm just going to do a couple. I quite like this one here that kind of frames his face for the ladybird to sit just far enough away from his mouth that he's probably not going to eat it. So we're going to start on the left hand side about halfway up. And I'm going to add a nice big curved line. I'm going to try and do it without stopping. Going from one side all the way over to the top right corner. A nice big shape in there. I'm going to make it a little bit thicker on the left hand side and a bit smaller on the right. Okay, and then yeah, just keep adding a few more. So I might do another one that crosses over both of these down the right hand side. So they kind of all need to be different sizes as well. Try not to make every single one the exact same thickness. So if you are using your big brush and you're getting really big lines every time, it might be worth swapping to one of your smaller brushes just to get a little bit of a variety in your backgrounds. I'm really hoping that you guys are all okay with your brush strokes. I think the main thing for this step is to try not to stop halfway up your lines. Try and go from one side all the way to the other side without stopping, because then that way you'll probably get the smoothest line possible. I think I might just do maybe one more darker, thicker one just over in this corner over here. And now I'm going to switch to my smaller cropped brush, the one that I showed you at the beginning, and we did this one. And I'm going to make my green a lot lighter. So to get it lighter, I'm going to add a whole load of yellow and a whole load of white into that bit of paint. So it's still green, it's just a very, very light green. So kind of like it's kind of like all the background colours all mixed together. So you end up with a light-ish kind of green. So yeah, we're going to add a few more of these in. Remember, they can cross over each other as well. So we're going to maybe do another one. I quite like this one as well. So I'm going to do another one that crosses over that top middle part of the canvas. So I'm going to start from one side over on the right hand side here. And I'm going to just swoop it all the way along without stopping, hopefully. And off. There we go. So remember, you can have one side of the line that's a little bit thicker than the other. And then it looks like it's kind of like leaning over or maybe twisting slightly as well. If you've got one side that's a bit bigger, it looks like that's more flat. And then as it goes thin, it could be twisting round. It just adds a little bit more detail to your gorgeous paintings. And yeah, a few more. I'm not going to do that many more actually. I'm just going to do a couple of really small, thin ones. Just kind of filling in the corners mostly. So I'm not going to add any more right in the middle here. I'm going to leave that nice and empty. I can do quite a few more at the bottom. So I quite like that one. Almost like a mirror image of this one at the top. No, it's not. Ignore me, it's not a mirror image at all. It's another line going down, cutting off that bottom section. And might do, yeah, I think I like this one, but I'm gonna, on my one now, I'm gonna make it overlap these two over here. So just make sure you keep looking at your brush, making sure you're always leading with those short bristles of the brush, if you're using the diagonal one, because you might be struggling a little bit if you're using the other side of the brush. Really makes it a lot harder. Okay, what other ones do we need to add? So we've just got one layer of the dark one. So we've got a dark one here, 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 and here. And then the rest are all light ones. Now you could have a lot more dark ones and a lot more lighter ones. It's up to you. You could go even lighter than this as well. If you want to take it even further, you could add a bit more white into your green. So whereas before we added in a bit more yellow and blue, you could add yellow, white, and blue. And you get another layer of a nice pale green. Might just do a couple with this one. So I've got a couple here that I can add. I think the best thing to do is to take a step back from your painting. And if you've got any major empty spaces that aren't this bit here, that's okay for your major empty space. Just anywhere else that you think might look nice with another bit of grass. I think I might stop there. It's hard to know when to stop, so it's always a good idea to put the brush down, take a step back from your painting. I know I've said that a lot, but it really, really does help to see it as a whole image. And if you have got any way to take a photo of your painting, then do take a picture of that step, because the next thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to just go straight in with our frog. So we're going to start with the top half. We're going to add the green in like this. The white comes in afterwards, but we're going to start with a very, very pale green to begin with, so we can change it if we need to. So very pale green, we're going to add in this like M shape around where his eyes are going to go. Then we'll do the bottom bit as well. Then we'll add in the hands and the legs, and then we'll just build up after that. So let's mix up our nice green colour. So it's pretty much the colour that we used last. However, we don't really want that much white in it, because otherwise he doesn't look quite as shiny. Having the white on it, apart from this bottom bit, he kind of looks a little bit dull. So we want to make him look nice and bright and colourful. So I'm going to add a bit more yellow back in to my green, just to warm it up slightly, and a tiny bit of blue. So it's just like a mid-light-ish kind of green colour that we've got going on. So not too dark, not too light. And for this first step, we are going to start with that M shape. So it looks a bit strange for a little while until we finish the whole thing. So the first thing we need to do is mark in roughly where we want the middle of the eyes. It's kind of like this bit in here. So it's right over here. So it needs to be a little bit higher than halfway. So if you use the right hand side of your canvas, where we've got our first marker of our grass, use that as a starting point to pull your brush over. So we're not touching the canvas just yet, but it's just to get an idea of roughly where we need to go. I'm going to go a little bit higher and just over from halfway on the left hand side. So to make it a bit easier, let's just find halfway across and about halfway down, and then we're going to go up to the left slightly. So somewhere over here. I'm going to do a little blob to make sure I'm happy with that being my starting point. Now once we've got this all on, again, things might move around slightly. It might not stay in this exact space. Like that might end up being more of the second eye on the left hand side. It might not always be the centre. So it's just a good place to start, somewhere over on the left hand side in the space that we've got. over here. And then from this little point, we're going to add in our M shape. So for this, I would use, if possible, one of your smaller diagonal brushes. If you don't have one of those ones, I'd probably use your big brush just to get this bit in. So I've got my longer bristles pointing up to the top left corner, and the M shape is kind of like a little bit on the side. So it's also quite a rounded M shape as well. So I'm going to go to the right first. I'm going to add in a big curve. So that's one side of the M. I'm going to do the same thing going the other way. Now you definitely want to try and make both eyes the same sort of size, which is not easy. So if you need to take a step back and spend a bit more time making these a bit neater, I think mine are quite small actually. Yeah, you can go ahead and make them a little bigger. Yeah, I think mine was a bit too tiny. So I'm making the bulges quite big. But hopefully you can kind of see that M shape that I was talking about. With that little dip in the middle. Something a little bit like this. And then to finish off the top bit, from the bottom of our eyes, so from where we've just finished that M shape, we then need to open it back out again. So it's kind of like we've got two circles joined together. That's kind of like the shape of it. So if you want to fill actually those two arches in, like the M shape, fill it in. So we've got a bit of an idea of what the shape is. And then from the bottom of these bits, we then need to pull this line outwards. So mine's going to have quite a big tummy, I think. And we need to stop when we get to that line going across our canvas. So the best thing to do is just to fill it in with every little step that we do, because sometimes it can get a little bit confusing if we've just got lots of outlines going on. So filling it in, making sure we don't go over the top of that line. Oops, already have. So if you've got that big brush, obviously you can just do some big, thick brush strokes and you'll get a nice soft finish, whereas mine's a little bit more textured at the second because I've got that small brush. There we go. We want to make sure that the edges of the frog is nice and crisp as well. So I would use your brush with the handle pointing into the frog, and as you're pulling the line around, it should bunch up the paint right on the outside, and you should get quite a nice slick, crisp line running down the edge. Okay, I'm probably going to stop there. I know I'm now just fiddling, trying to get it bigger, but I think that will do for the second. So the next little step we need to add in is his tummy. So the bit that's going to go underneath the stem to form his stomach. So carry on with that same colour that we've just been using, and where we've finished our frog's shape going into the stem, I'm going to carry that round, and I'm going to add in like a U shape that goes from one side all the way to the other. So let's do a little dot either side so we know where we're going to start and where we're going to finish. And we need to pull it down. So the biggest part is in the middle of the frog. So halfway across. And again, I'd fill that in just while we've got the paint on the brush. There we go. So do make sure that your top half is lined up with the bottom half, otherwise it will look a little bit freaky if you've got this frog that's kind of got his bottom half not quite attached. So yeah, I think mine's looking quite wide and small. I think mine is a bit taller. So when you have done that bottom shape, feel free to take a step back, take a photo, and if there's any bits that you want to adapt or change, now is a good time to do so. I think I just need to make my eyes just a little bit more pointy. Yeah, that's better. I think. It's very hard to see if they're symmetrical or not. So to see if they're the same size, it's very hard to do unless you take a picture of it. So definitely recommend taking a little photo of your painting at this stage. I was just playing with my hair with the paintbrush in the hand and just painted the wall. Don't recommend doing that. So when you have done your frog shape and you've got the bottom half, I still think mine could be a little bit chubbier, but we'll probably make it bigger when we add the white in later. And the top half, we've got that M shape at the top with the round bits at the side, opens back out. The next thing you need to do is add in a slightly darker colour. So we need to let that dry for a couple of seconds. So I was going to add the hands in, but I think we need a darker colour first before we do that. Otherwise, it'll be very hard to go back in to our first layer once we've kind of moved on. So now is a good time to have a break. If you haven't had a break yet or anything like that, then take a step back, go do something else for a couple of minutes, maybe grab a drink, go to the loo or something, and then come back whenever you're ready. And hopefully your background of your frog will be quite dry. Mine's still quite wet actually. So I think the next logical step would probably be to add the eyes in first. Because once you've added the darker colour, it might be a little bit tricky to paint the white over the top. So I would take a couple of minutes before you have a break, just making sure that you're really happy with the shape of the frog so far. So if you want to make anything bigger or anything like that, now is a good time to change anything, because once the eyes go on, it's a little bit harder to change it. So I need to waft mine a little bit more because it's quite wet actually. I think my frog's a little bit lopsided. I might just quickly make it a little bit more symmetrical. It's like a little bit of a wobbly frog at the second. So I've got, one side that's absolutely huge and the other side that's not quite so big. So now is a good time to sort out any bits that you might not be happy with. And if you absolutely love it, then perfect. You don't need to add anything else to it at all until the next step. So you definitely don't want to overwork it at all, because it's a very fine line between having it just right and then adding that one extra brush stroke that just doesn't add anything to it. It kind of just doesn't ruin it as such, but yeah, you always kind of regret that line, kind of thinking I shouldn't have added that. Okay, so all I've done was made my frog a little bit less lopsided because I had one side really, really big and the other side not so big. So we definitely want to have some clean white on the palette. I need to add a bit more. So my white had quite a lot of yellow and blue mixed into it. So it might be worth popping a new bit of white onto your palettes and again wafting it, getting it as dry as possible, ready for the eyes. So I'll just talk through the next couple of bits just to keep you up to speed. So we'll add in all the white bits next. We'll add in the eyes. We'll lighten up this bottom bit as well. And then we're going to go on to the slightly darker green, which will really take shape after that. The frog will really come to life. And we'll add his legs and then his feet and then the mouth and the ladybug. So there's really not much left to do actually. I know it looks quite empty at the second, but as soon as those eyes go on, it totally transforms. but you really want to make sure that your frog's first layer is totally dry. So you might used to do quite a lot of wafting or quite a lot of hair drying to get it nice and dry. So I'm hoping that you're all okay so far. If there's anything that you're not sure about or want me to go back over, do let me know. And I'm happy to go over any bits that you might not be sure about. But I've got a feeling that these are going to look pretty cute. So, the eyes. Make sure I've definitely got a nice dry. Mine's nearly dry. But I'm quite impatient, so I'm probably going to just go on to the next bit and hope that it covers. So we want to make sure we've got a nice clean brush. If you've got any of that green in there, it's probably going to make your eyes go a bit green as well. So maybe rinse it off a couple of times. If you want to maybe take your brushes to the sink or something and run some running water through the bristles, might clean them a little bit more thoroughly. But for this white, you want to have a nice clean brush. I'd probably use your small flat brush, and I'm going to add a little bit of water to some white. Now my water is quite green, and when you pick up the white paint on your brush with the green water, it makes your white look green, but it doesn't actually come out green. It just means that it's the water sort of mixing into that white, and it's fine. Like, the paint is a lot thicker than the water, so it's not going to show up. And we're painting on top of a green background anyway, so it's not going to be too much of a hassle. But if your paint water is really, really thick and really painty, then you might want to change your water before you do this next step. So I'll leave that up to you. I'm just trying to find the more drier side. I think this side's okay. So the eyes are quite big. I think they're a lot bigger than what you think they actually need to be. So to start with, I'm going to start with just a little blob right in the centre of those two circles that we've got for where the eyes are going to go, underneath the two arches. And I'm going to make these a bit bigger, little bits at a time. Try not to overwork where your brush strokes have already gone, because if the frog is still a little bit wet, when you paint over the top of it too many times, it will just pick up the paint from underneath and mix it into your white. So once the paint's on there, I would just move on to the next little bit. Okay, I'm going to make it a little bit bigger. We might need 2 coats. So if your white is going totally see-through and you can just see that green showing through completely, then we might need to leave it to dry for a little bit longer. Now you definitely want to make sure that you have a little bit of a gap above the eye and around it. It looks very strange in a second, doesn't it? So I've got an even-ish kind of border going around the circle. I'm going to clean off the brush, and I'm going to do another eye over on the right-hand side. So using that flat edge of the brush, pushing it round. Try and make sure that they're the same kind of size, which again is quite tricky to do. So if you need to pause the video and take your time with this, then please do. There is no rush whatsoever to keep up. Just want you guys to be pleased with your paintings, and it's sometimes very hard if you feel like you need to rush, which when you're doing circles, you definitely don't want to rush. So yeah, if you haven't taken a step back yet, then take another step back now, so that you can see your eyes from a little bit of a distance. Makes it much easier to see if they're the same size or not. I think mine might be the same size, kind of. Okay, I'm going to leave that as it is. I think it might be okay. So the next bit with the white is just to go back over the tummy. So I would actually outline the bottom line that we've got on our frog. So I've got my same brush, a little bit of white, and I'm going to go from one side all the way to the other, using the brush the same way as we did when we added in all of these stems and things. So using it lengthwise, so leading with the short edge of the brush, dragging the long bit behind, just to get that bottom edge in. And then once we've got that in, we can turn the brush. So we've got the long bristles pointing up, and I'm just going to do big swooping brush strokes with the white paint, going up the body, stopping just below the stem going across that it's hanging off of. So you just definitely want to make sure that the bottom part of the tummy is really light. And then as you work your way up, the more the paint will come off of your brush. So the top part of the tummy will probably be quite see-through, which is quite good. Where the white is kind of faded off the brush. And it's a good time to make sure that it's nice and even. So if you need to change anything about the shape of your frog, then you can do that with the white paint. I think mine might be okay. This side's looking a little bit off. Okay, so we're not completely covering that whole bottom half in white. You want to be able to see a little bit of that green showing up just underneath our stem. So one thing that does look quite nice with that bit is if you bring it up, so with not a lot of paint on the brush, a very, very small amount of the white paint, you can do a couple of little brush strokes just above as well. And all it does is it just brings the two halves together. So you still see a little bit of that green in the middle. And then a little bit of the white just on the top as well. And that will show up underneath our mouth as well. It makes it look like it's fully rounded from underneath his mouth all the way under his tummy as well. So hopefully by now our eyes have dried up a little bit more. I think mine might need a few more minutes of wafting. I think mine looks a bit more like a toad rather than a frog at the second. But I think once the eyes go on, that's when it really does. Like when we add the pupils in, it starts making it look a little bit more of a cute frog rather than a big toad. And also the big smiley face as well, that makes a big difference. So keep wafting it until your eyes are dry, ready for the next layer of white. And kind of there. If they're really not dry, like I know sometimes the white paint takes a little bit of a long time to dry. It's not really covering, it's still quite sticky. So I think before we do the second layer, let's add in the slightly darker colour of green, because you really want to make sure that those eyes are bright and white and crisp. And if it's still a little bit wet, it won't show up as nice and bold. So yeah, we'll leave the second layer of white just a little bit longer. So rinse off your brushes and we are going to carry on with the green, but we're going to make it a little bit more of a bluier green, which means we need to add a bit more blue in. So the main colours for this are yellow, with quite a lot more blue. So yeah, lots and lots of blue. And then a tiny dot of white. Now you definitely don't want a lot of white at all, just the tiniest little dot mixed in. But it's mostly, I think the blue is the main colour actually, and then a little bit of yellow, a little bit of white. So it's quite a dark-ish kind of green. And this green is going to work really well to bring out the eyes a little bit more. So the dark green is going to sit going around the eyes, which hopefully that first layer of green should be dry by now, hopefully. And yeah, we're going to just go around, being very careful we don't paint over our eyes. And all this top bit. kind of giving them some eyebrows. And then we need to bring this darker green down underneath the eyes as well. So be very careful. Just go very slowly when you're going around these areas. And then to blend this out, you want to try and do this bit not too quickly, but a little bit quicker, just so that we can get it to blend. So what I've done is I've added a little bit of yellow to my brush. I've not rinsed it off at all, as you can see it's quite messy. I added a little bit of yellow to it, and all I'm doing is going underneath where we've just done that darker green, and I'm doing messy brush strokes to blend it down. So all we're doing is making that green a little bit lighter as it goes down into the tummy. And don't worry if that didn't quite work. If your green has just come down really far, that's absolutely fine, because we've still got quite a light tummy anyway. So that's all good. The blending is quite a hard thing to do. So if it's not smooth or anything like that, there's no worries whatsoever. As long as it's just a little bit darker at the top and a little bit lighter at the bottom, and that's fine. And it is quite light at the bottom because we've got the white. So we are all good. Okay, I'm hoping that you're all okay up till now. I still think my white is still a little bit wet. So we're just going to keep going with that darker colour. So the going back to adding in a bit more blue into that green, and we can add in his legs. So it's that nice dark green, so yellow, lots of blue, tiny bit of white just to keep it on that slightly more of a toned down colour. And the legs are just like, how do I explain it? We'll just paint them because I can't think of a way to explain it. Don't overthink it. All it is like a little, like a U shape or half a circle, like the bottom of a circle, starting from just over from the side of the body underneath the stem. So I'm going to do a little dash into here, and this is going to curve down, following the same shape as the body. So it's like this a little bit in here, and it's going to join up underneath that white part of the tummy. I think mine's got quite big legs. So it kind of ends up looking a bit like a W, kind of. So we've got one side, this is like the left-hand side where it comes down and up. Then we need to leave a little bit of a gap underneath the body, so a little bit further along. Then we're going to do the other side of the W. So going down and up, joining to the other side. Now I've got one leg that's a bit longer than the other side. You definitely want to make sure that they're quite even in sizes. And then we just need to fill it in. So for this bit, you definitely don't want to go over your white tummies. Be very careful when you're painting around that bottom part and filling it in. I mean, to me, it kind of looks like a banana shape, but I think that might just be me. So if a banana shape sort of helps you picture the shape that we need, then fantastic. If you're thinking, what is she talking about? And that's also fine. I don't mind. Yeah, there we go. I mean, you can kind of see it coming together now. Once you've got the last couple of bits in, it really starts to come to life. So we're going to carry on with that same colour, and the next thing we're going to do is add in the hands, the fingers. So it's going to get a little bit lost for a couple of seconds just while we paint over, because it's a very similar colour to the legs. But later on, we're going to add in a really, really, really dark green with our tiny brush, and we're going to go in between all the fingertips. So don't panic if you sort of lose the legs for a second. They will come back, I promise. So with that same colour, same brush, the fingers are Not too hard, you'll be pleased to know. So they start off with the arch shape. So these are going to sit over the top of our stems that we've got going on. So if you can see on this one, I've got an arch shape that goes up and over, kind of like half a circle, going up and over like that to mark in the top of the hands. Then for the fingers, they're like circles where the ends of his fingers are, and then they join up into that arch shape. So we'll just go through it nice and slowly all together, and then we can break it down in a bit more detail as well. So I think the first thing we should probably do is mark in the top of the hands on top of the stem. So I'm going to make sure that my inside of the hand is going to overlap the side of the body. So I'm going to do an arch shape that goes up and over like this. There we go. And then I'd fill that in to start with. So we just add that half circle on top. And I'm probably going to make mine actually a little bit bigger because I think he needs quite big hands. And then the next bit we're going to do is we're going to take this half circle over the top of the stem like this. So we overlap. Okay, my hands are now absolutely huge. I know I said I was going to make them bigger, but I didn't realise how big. There we go. So I've just overlapped the stem like that. And we'll do the same thing on the other side. So repeating exactly the same steps. So starting with the arch shape, just going up and over. And try and make sure they're the same sort of size. There's huge hands. And then extending it over the top of the stem, ready to add in some of our fingers. I'm going to fill that in a bit more. So when you're ready and we've got those half a circles in there, the next we need to add in are the fingers. So I think the easiest way to do this is to start from one side and just work your way across. So have your brush with the bristles held horizontally. So that means all your bristles are flat on its side like this. If you don't have the same brush as me, that's absolutely fine. If you've got a round brush, it might be a bit easier and you can just paint in the same shape. It's all good. If you've got the round brush, you can paint in the round shape of the fingers without taking the brush off of the canvas. So when you get to the end of the fingers, you can twist the long part of the brush around and in and up. So we've got nice big wide fingertips. And then I would just keep going. Adding another one in right next to it. So you kind of want to have, if possible, 3 fingers. If you don't quite get 3 in, that's absolutely fine. You can just stick with the 2. Or if you can get more than 3 over the top of your stem, then that's fantastic. Either is fine. I don't actually know how many fingertips a frog has. No idea. Not sure if that's common knowledge or not. So yeah, the last one. Right next to it. Make sure that they kind of join up to the side of the hands as well. I'll just bring that a little bit closer. So yeah, my frog has got absolutely gigantic hands. He is definitely not going to be falling off that stem anytime soon. And then same thing on the other one. So start from one side and twist the brush round so the long bristles go around and back up. So if you have got the number 6 round brush, and if that's your only small brush, then it's not too tricky. The only difference is that you might just need to do it a few more times to get the full shape. You might just need to paint in the outside of the line first. So we're actually painting in that full circle shape. So putting it down and out and round. kind of looks like drips to me. Like a water droplet coming out, like slime or something. Where it's like gloopy at the bottom. And then thin at the top. So yeah, whichever brush you've got, just take your time. Try and make sure they're nice even sized fingers. I'm very excited to get his eyes on there. I feel like once the eyes are on, he'll start looking quite cute. At the minute, he looks a little bit scary. So, again, if you haven't taken a picture or if you haven't taken one for a little while, then now's a good time to take a photo. Yeah, my eyes are definitely dry now. Hopefully your eyes are dry too. If they are still quite wet, then you can always, pause the video and take a little break as well if you want to. But I'm going to rinse off my brush completely, as much as possible, and I'm going to add in another layer of white to the eyes. So I know I did kind of like this, the start of my second layer earlier, but it didn't quite cover. So I'm just doing another layer on top, and if your paint has dried up totally, then this white should now go on, hopefully really quite bright. Hopefully. I think that's worked quite well. And if you need to make them any bigger or smaller, or if you've noticed that once you've added the white that actually they're not the same size, or if one of them is maybe slightly wobbly, then you can just correct it and adapt it with the new layer of white paint. It's very hard to tell though, so that's why I always keep saying to take a step back, because it really helps to see it from a bit of a distance. I still think that one of them is bigger than the other. I can't work out. I think this one needs to come down a little bit lower, and then I will be ready for the next little step. So again, if while we've got the white paint, if you wanted to add any more white to your frog's tummy, or even if you wanted to make maybe the tips of your fingers a little bit lighter, you can add a little bit of white to them. That might look quite nice. So I think I'm actually going to add a bit of water to my white paint just to thin it out slightly. And just on the fingertips, with barely any paint on the brush at all, I'm just going to add slightly lighter brush strokes. So where that white has gone a little bit runny, it's blending in with that green that we've added, and it's made the tip of my fingers a little bit lighter. And you can do that actually, maybe a little bit of yellow into it as well. Maybe a lighter yellow would work a little bit nicer than just the white paint. Yeah, okay, that's helped, I think. That's definitely how to make them stand out a bit more as well. So when you've done the eyes, you can add a little bit of white and yellow, just the fingertips. You don't have to though. I think it did look quite nice without as well. And we are going to go in with that dark colour later as well. So this bit is not essential. So don't feel like you have to add the lighter colour in if you don't want to. Because sometimes you might not need to. Like I might do a step and you might think, actually I don't need to do that bit. And that's totally fine. It's good to know when to stop. Which, like I said before, I find it very hard to know when to stop. So I'm probably going to just stop after this a little bit. Let's just make the fingertips a bit lighter. There we go. So we are on to the final steps of our lovely painting. Now, you don't have to call your frog Freddy. You could call it whatever name you like. Freddy or Francis or something. There's lots of names you can call a frog. But the very last little bits really add the character to it. So if you wanted to add like a cheeky tongue sticking out somewhere, hopefully not, you know, to eat the lovely ladybird, or you could maybe add like, I don't know, you could add something to make it like your own sort of character. But yeah, and then it makes it much easier to name them as well. So let's move on to our final brush, so our tiny little number 6 rounded brush for all of the last couple of steps. And the first thing that we need to do is add in his smile. So for this, we're going to just use the black by itself with a little bit of water mixed into it. So it goes a little bit more of a, like a, not runny black, because you definitely don't want it to drip at all. Just a slightly more watered down black than what it was before. Now for this bit, it's really important that you don't rush it at all, because you want to make sure you've got a nice even smile going on. Now the reason why it kind of looks like he's unhappy is because you want to make it look like he's got that nice round tummy and the mouth is sort of just sitting right on top. So we start off with like a frown. So it's like it's taller in the middle in between his eyes, and then it gets lower on the sides. So let's just start with a little dot or a little dash just above the white part of his tummy and in the middle of his eyes. So somewhere around here. And as we're building up the smile, his mouth, I would just do one side for a little bit and then the other side for a little bit. So you're just matching it up, one side then the other. And then when you get, just before you get to the hands, it's quite nice for him to have a little cheeky grin going up the side here. Oops. Now you don't want to press too hard with your brush, because if you do press too hard, then your line comes out a little bit thicker, which is fine, but you probably want to keep it the same thickness all the way along. And then I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I think I might end up just slightly missing the side of the mouth on this one, so it's probably going to disappear a little bit behind the hand. I think. Yeah. Kind of looks like a big mustache as well. If you wanted to make it into a mustache, you could do. So then we need to add the pupils into his eyes, so the black bits into the centre of the eyes. So I'm having my eyes kind of looking up towards that ladybug. So I'm going to start with a little dot just towards the top left sides of the eyes. And then we can build up those little dots to get bigger and bigger and bigger. And I wouldn't make these too huge. You definitely want to make sure that they're the same size. So once you've done one side, no matter how big it is, do the same thing on the other, so you're building up even amounts at the same time. So I can probably go a little bit bigger than that. And you can use any brush for this, so whichever brush you find easiest to use. Still think I could go a little bit bigger than that. So with that small number 6 brush, what I'm doing is pushing it around in a spiral, sort of without taking the brush off the painting, and that really helps to get it nice and smooth. I think that's okay. So I'm going to do the same thing on the other side. I'm going to add a bit of water to the black, so if it's gone a little bit sticky, whoops, or it's not quite coming out as even as you were hoping, then add a little bit of water to it, and it really helps. Okay, we're on to the final steps. So rinse off the brush And you can add a ladybug, you can add in a couple of flies, you could do lots and lots of insects, you could maybe even do another frog somewhere as well. But if you want to do a ladybird, all we need to do is rinse off the brush, pick up a little bit of red, and on one stem or a bit of grass somewhere, we can add a semicircle. So I'm going to add a little arch shape just sitting on top of one of those blades of grass. I'm going to put it right here. Nice bright red ladybird. Make it a little bit bigger. So you could put this down at the bottom, you could put it on the sides, you could put it anywhere on your painting. You don't even have to have a ladybird in, but I do think that the red looks really nice with the rest of the painting. You can even do a butterfly even. Like, there's so much you can add to this. There's no right or wrong whatsoever. Yeah, to finish off the ladybird, you want to go back to the black, and we're just going to add in some dots. So we're getting ready to add dots, because it's quite small. You can turn your brush the other way around and use the wooden part of the brush. So you can mix it around into that black paint. And I'm going to add in 3 dots onto my ladybird. So I've got 1 dot there. One dot there. And another one. Yes, we've got 3 dots on the ladybird. And then to add the head and the antennas in, or antenna, you just need to add 1 more circle, or 1 more blob of black paint to the front of the ladybird. I mean, you could do it this way. I'm gonna keep it this way. So a little dot just on one side of the ladybird. I'm going to go back to the bristles, I think, for this bit, because it's a slightly bigger circle. And then coming out of the circle, which is the head, we just need to add in 2 little lines, and then 2 little dots on the top. How cute is that ladybird? And just while we're using the black, if we pop that black into some of our green, because remember, we're going to make that really dark green just to make the fingers stand out a little bit more. So a little bit of black into whatever green you have on your palette. So if that is just yellow and blue together and a bit of black, that's fine, because your green might have dried up by now, which is absolutely fine. But this dark colour is really nice just to kind of outline the fingertips. And I would use your your smallest brush for this bit. And you could, if you wanted to, you could use this to go all the way around the ladybird, the frog. So if there's any bits that you want to make stand out a little bit more, like maybe the legs might look quite good, the slightly darker bit going underneath. It's like a little bit of an outline, isn't it? Kind of makes it look a bit more cartoony. So it's up to you if you want to add that bit in. You definitely don't have to if you don't want to. But yeah, the final step is to add in some white highlights to the frog's eyes. So I'm rinsing off that number 6 brush, that really small brush, and I'm just going to use a big blob of white paint without any water on the brush. Big blob of white, and I'm going to do 1 dot per eye first. It's 1 big white dot. Try and get these in the same place as well. So if you put it to the left-hand side of one eye, you're going to make it to the put it on the left-hand side of the other one as well. And then it's quite nice to finish it off with a little dash. It's like a little curved line underneath as well. And adding in those last highlights really bring the whole thing to life. So you could maybe add a little highlight to the ladybird as well. So a little white line, a little bit on this forehead to make him look a bit shinier. But yeah, you could add white to anywhere really. I think maybe the bottom of my frog might be looking a little bit dark. And I did say about this earlier, so you might have already done this step actually. It was just adding in a little bit of white to the bottom bit here, which I didn't actually do. I said about it and then I never actually did it. So if you've done this bottom bit, then you are all sorted. So that is everything that you need to know for our very cute Freddy, or whatever you're going to call it, the frog. So what I would do is sign your gorgeous, gorgeous paintings, maybe label it as to what your frog's name is going to be, take a big step back and take a photo, because it's really nice to have a look at your painting through a phone or through a photo. It always looks so different as well. And do share them with us. If you've taken some pictures or your step-by-steps, and yeah, if you want to share it, then you can tag us on Facebook, you can send them as an email, or on our Instagram page as well. So you can tag us on those, which is @BrushParty on Facebook and @BrushPartyUK on Instagram. Or you can just go onto our Facebook page and click create post, and that way you'll be able to upload your photos with like a little comment and things as well. But yeah, I really, really hope that you've enjoyed painting today, and I can't wait to see them. I think that's all of our family events for the week, but we've got lots of new paintings coming up soon. So do have a look at the website, and we've got lots of new equipment in the shop as well. So have a look at the website and the shop if you need any more painting materials. But I think that's everything from me. So I will see you all again very, very soon. Have a lovely rest of the day, guys. Bye.